The spring of 1851 arrived in Thornfield County like a reluctant guest, with rain that seemed to wash away the last vestiges of winter but left behind a lingering chill that penetrated even the sturdiest of stone manors. Such was the weather on the afternoon Beatrice Redfield arrived at Belvington Hall, her weathered carpet-bag clutched tightly in gloved hands that had long since lost their fineness. The grand estate loomed before her, its Gothic spires reaching toward the leaden sky like accusing fingers. Beatrice pulled her modest cloak tighter around her shoulders, the wind tugging at the plain bonnet that concealed her chestnut curls. The journey from the village had been arduous, the hired cart leaving her at the imposing iron gates with nothing but her meager possessions and the weight of desperation upon her shoulders. "I shall manage," she whispered to herself, a phrase that had become her private litany since her father's passing 3 months prior. "I must." The Reverend Redfield had left his only daughter nothing but debts and a reputation for scholarly excellence. The latter, at least, had secured her this position as governess to the children of Baron Alexander Brantley, a widower whose reputation in London society had once been the subject of ladies' drawing-room conversations from Mayfair to Belgravia. A portly housekeeper greeted Beatrice at the massive oak doors, her assessment of the new governess evident in the slight downward turn of her mouth. "Miss Redfield, I presume?" "I am Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper," she said, her voice as starched as her apron. "You're expected. The children are in the nursery, though his lordship insists they take their lessons in the library. A peculiar arrangement, but one does not question the master of the house." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I am eager to meet my charges," Beatrice replied, forcing warmth into her voice despite the chilly reception. "His lordship is away on business in London but is expected to return within the fortnight. Until then, you shall answer to me regarding household matters," the housekeeper continued, leading Beatrice through corridors adorned with ancestral portraits and tapestries that spoke of generations of wealth and privilege. As they ascended the grand staircase, Beatrice felt the weight of those painted eyes upon her, judging, perhaps, the country vicar's daughter who dared step above her station to teach the children of the aristocracy. Yet necessity had made her bold, and the alternative, seeking employment in the factories that belched smoke on the horizon, was unthinkable. The nursery door opened to reveal 2 children, a girl of perhaps 10 years with solemn eyes that reminded Beatrice of still ponds, and a boy of 7 whose restless energy manifested in the constant movement of his small hands. "Miss Emma and Master James, your new governess has arrived," Mrs. Winters announced with all the enthusiasm of one announcing the arrival of a tax collector. The girl, Emma, rose from her seat by the window and curtsied with practiced precision. "How do you do, Miss Redfield?" "I am well, thank you, Miss Emma," Beatrice replied, offering a warm smile. "And you, Master James? Are you also well?" The boy looked up from the mechanical toy he'd been dismantling. "Will you teach us about dinosaur bones? Father says they're relics of creatures from before the Great Flood, but my former tutor said they were millions of years old before he was dismissed." Mrs. Winters made a disapproving sound. "Master James! Such impertinence! You'll not speak of Mr. Crawford in this house." Beatrice knelt to the boy's level. "Perhaps we might explore natural history together, Master James, after we've attended to your arithmetic and Latin." The boy's face brightened momentarily before clouding with suspicion. "That's what Mr. Crawford said, but father sent him away before we could start." "James!" Emma hissed, her eyes darting nervously to Mrs. Winters. Beatrice sensed the undercurrents but maintained her composure. "We have time for many subjects, I assure you. Now, perhaps you might show me what you've been studying." After Mrs. Winters departed, the tension in the room eased somewhat. Emma brought forth their lesson books, while James reluctantly abandoned his mechanical curiosity. "Father rarely comes to the nursery," Emma confided in a low voice. "Not since Mother died." "I'm sorry for your loss," Beatrice said gently. "It was 3 years ago," James added matter-of-factly. "She died having baby Charlotte, who died too." Emma shot her brother a reproving look. "It's not proper to speak of it so plainly." "But it's true," James insisted. "And father became like a ghost afterward. That's what the servants say when they think I'm not listening." Beatrice's heart constricted at the boy's words. She had seen grief transform her own father after her mother's passing, turning a once vibrant man into a shadow that moved through their modest vicarage without truly inhabiting it. "Grief affects us all differently," she said carefully. "But I'm certain your father cares for you deeply." "He cares more for his books and his club in London," Emma said with a hint of bitterness that belied her young years. In the days that followed, Beatrice established a routine with the children. Mornings were devoted to scholarly pursuits, arithmetic, Latin, geography, and literature, while afternoons allowed for music, drawing, and, to James's delight, natural sciences. The boy possessed a keen mind that reminded Beatrice of her father's intellectual curiosity, while Emma showed remarkable aptitude for languages and music. The library, as Mrs. Winters had indicated, served as their classroom. It was a magnificent space, with shelves that reached the vaulted ceiling and required rolling ladders to access the uppermost volumes. Leather-bound tomes lined the walls, their gilded spines catching the light that streamed through tall windows. It was there, precisely 10 days after her arrival, that Beatrice first encountered Baron Alexander Brantley. She had been reading aloud from The Tempest, with Emma taking the role of Miranda and James reluctantly playing Ferdinand, when the library door opened. The man who entered seemed to bring with him the very atmosphere of London, sophisticated, imposing, and faintly dangerous. He stood at least 6 feet tall, his posture military straight, with raven hair that showed strands of silver at the temples. His features were sharp and aristocratic, from the high forehead to the aquiline nose and strong jaw. But it was his eyes that captured Beatrice's attention, grey as the winter sea and just as turbulent. "Father!" Emma cried, abandoning her book and rushing toward him. James followed more cautiously, his earlier exuberance replaced by a formal restraint that struck Beatrice as unnatural in one so young. "Emma, James," the Baron acknowledged, briefly embracing his daughter and clasping his son's shoulder. His gaze then settled on Beatrice, who had risen from her seat. "And you must be the new governess." Beatrice curtsied. "Yes, my lord." "Beatrice Redfield." "The vicar's daughter from Thornwood," he said, more statement than question. "Yes, my lord." His gaze was assessing, and Beatrice felt herself being measured against some unknown standard. "I trust you find your accommodation satisfactory." "Most satisfactory, thank you." "And the children? Are they progressing in their studies?" Before Beatrice could respond, James interjected, "Miss Redfield has been teaching us about fossilized creatures, father. She says the new Crystal Palace exhibition will feature models of them." A shadow crossed the Baron's face. "Does she indeed?" Emma nudged her brother sharply. "Among other subjects, my lord," Beatrice hastened to add. "The children excel in their traditional studies. Emma's French pronunciation is particularly impressive, and James shows a natural affinity for mathematics." The Baron's expression remained unreadable. "I see. Children, you're dismissed to the nursery. I wish to speak with Miss Redfield privately." Emma curtsied while James bowed, both casting concerned glances toward Beatrice as they departed. When the door closed behind them, the Baron moved to the fireplace, resting one arm on the mantel as he regarded her. "Miss Redfield, I selected you for this position based on your father's reputation for orthodox scholarship and moral rectitude. I did not expect to return home to find my son's head filled with questionable scientific theories." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm but met his gaze steadily. "My lord, I assure you I've taught nothing that contradicts religious instruction. Natural history is merely one facet of God's creation, worthy of study alongside Scripture. My previous tutor held similar views. He is no longer in my employ. So I've gathered, my lord." Beatrice took a steadying breath. "If I may speak plainly." A raised eyebrow indicated permission. "Your children are exceptionally bright. They question the world around them, as intelligent young minds should. To stifle that curiosity seems counterproductive to their development." The Baron's lips pressed into a thin line. "You overstep, Miss Redfield." "Perhaps, my lord. But I believe my duty extends beyond recitation of facts to nurturing minds capable of discernment and independent thought. A governess's duty is to prepare my daughter for society and my son for Eton, not to encourage dangerous speculations. Beatrice felt a flare of indignation. With respect, my lord, the world is changing. The Great Exhibition itself celebrates human knowledge and innovation. Would you have your children enter that world blinkered? The Baron studied her for a long moment, and Beatrice feared she had indeed overstepped fatally. Her position at Belvington Hall was her only shield against destitution. My wife, he said finally, his voice lower, shared your view on education. She believed in fostering curiosity, even when it led to uncomfortable questions. The unexpected reference to Lady Brantley momentarily silenced Beatrice. I will permit you to continue teaching natural history alongside traditional subjects, he continued, provided you consult me before introducing particularly controversial topics. Relief washed over her. Thank you, my lord. I shall do so. See that you do. He moved toward the door, then paused. My wife would have liked you, Miss Redfield. She had little patience for convention when it conflicted with truth. With that cryptic statement, he departed, leaving Beatrice with the distinct impression that she had passed some sort of test, though what precisely it had measured, she could not say. That evening, as Beatrice sat at the small writing desk in her modest but comfortable room, penning a letter to her former housekeeper Mrs. Jennings, now her only connection to her previous life, she reflected on her encounter with Baron Brantley. There was a complexity to the man that intrigued her, despite his initial coldness. Beneath the aristocratic reserve, she sensed grief still raw despite the passing years. She had just sealed her letter when a knock came at her door. Opening it, she found Emma standing in her nightdress, a shawl thrown hastily over her shoulders. Miss Emma! You should be abed. I couldn't sleep, the girl confessed. I was worried father might dismiss you, like he did Mr. Crawford. Beatrice ushered her inside. Your father and I have reached an understanding. I'm not going anywhere. Relief softened Emma's features. Good. James and I, we've had for governesses since mother died. None stayed longer than 6 months. 4. Beatrice couldn't hide her surprise. Whatever for? Emma perched on the edge of the bed. The first left because father was too melancholy, the second because James set fire to her skirts, accidentally, he swears, the third because she felt the position beneath her when she learned of father's reputation, and Mr. Crawford because he and father quarrelled about science and religion. I see. Beatrice chose her next words carefully. And what reputation does your father have that would cause a governess to leave? Emma twisted her hands in her lap. People in London call him the Baron of brooding behind his back. They say he's become a recluse since mother died, except for his scientific meetings. The ladies at Lady Pembroke's garden party last summer whispered that he's gone quite mad with grief. That hardly seems cause for a governess to depart. There were other rumours. About mother's death. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. That father had driven her to exhaustion with his demands for an heir, that he... She broke off, clearly uncomfortable. Emma, such talk is harmful and almost certainly untrue, Beatrice said firmly. Gossip is a poison that damages reputations without cause. Now, it's late, and you should return to your bed before Mrs. Winters discovers you wandering the halls. After escorting Emma back to the nursery, Beatrice found sleep elusive. The child's words had painted a different picture of Baron Brantley than the controlled, if stern, man she had encountered. What sorrows lay behind those storm-grey eyes? And what rumours had so disturbed his daughter? The answers began to emerge in the weeks that followed, as spring gradually yielded to summer. The Baron, contrary to Beatrice's expectations, did not immediately return to London but remained at Belvington Hall, taking an increasing interest in his children's education. He would appear in the library during lessons, ostensibly to select a book, but Beatrice noted how he would linger, listening as she discussed history or literature with the children. Occasionally, he would interject with a clarification or anecdote, revealing a breadth of knowledge that impressed her. One afternoon, as the children practiced their drawing in the garden, Beatrice found herself alone with the Baron in the library. The children are progressing well under your tutelage, he remarked, turning the pages of a scientific journal. Emma's pianoforte playing has improved considerably. She has natural talent, Beatrice replied. As does James with his mechanical pursuits. The Baron set aside his journal. You've been at Belvington for nearly a month, Miss Redfield. I find myself curious about your background. Your father was respected in clerical circles, but I know little of you personally. Beatrice smoothed her skirts, a habit when nervous. There is little to tell, my lord. My mother died when I was 12. I was educated at home by my father, assisted occasionally by visiting scholars. I kept his house and helped with parish duties until his passing. No suitors? A woman of your age and accomplishments would typically be married. She felt her cheeks warm at the personal nature of his inquiry. My circumstances did not allow for much society, my lord. The life of a country vicar's daughter is rather circumscribed. Yet you seem remarkably well read for someone of your background. My father believed education should not be limited by gender. Our home may have been humble, but it was filled with books. The Baron studied her with newfound interest. A progressive view. One I shared with my late wife. A silence fell between them, not entirely uncomfortable. The children mentioned your interest in the Great Exhibition, he said finally. I've been considering taking them to London to see it. Perhaps you would accompany us, as their governess. Beatrice could not conceal her surprise. That would be most educational for them, my lord. And for you as well, I suspect. The barest hint of a smile touched his lips. Unless you've already visited. No, my lord. My father's health prevented travel in his final years. Then it's settled. We shall depart next week. He rose to leave, then hesitated. My wife would have approved of your methods, Miss Redfield. She believed education should inspire wonder, not merely compliance. Before Beatrice could respond, he was gone, leaving her with the curious sensation of having glimpsed beyond the mask of the stern Baron to the man beneath. The journey to London marked a turning point. The children's excitement was contagious as they boarded the train, a first for James, who peppered the Baron with questions about steam engines and coal consumption that revealed how closely he'd been studying the subject. The Brantley townhouse in Belgrave Square was smaller than the country estate but no less imposing. Beatrice felt the curious gazes of the servants as she was shown to her room, aware that her position as governess placed her in the uncomfortable territory between family and staff. The Great Exhibition itself exceeded all expectations. The Crystal Palace shimmered like a diamond in the summer sun, its vast glass expanses housing treasures from across the empire and beyond. The children's eyes widened at each new marvel, mechanical inventions, exotic plants, artifacts from distant lands. It was before the dinosaur models that the most significant moment occurred. James had rushed ahead, his face alight with wonder at the massive reconstructions, while Emma lingered by a display of fossilized ammonites. They're quite extraordinary, aren't they? Baron Brantley said, coming to stand beside Beatrice. Remarkable, she agreed. To think such creatures once walked the earth. And now exist only as bones and scientific debate. He glanced at her. You handle such subjects with more grace than Mr. Crawford did. He insisted on presenting his views as indisputable fact. I believe in presenting evidence and encouraging questions, Beatrice replied. Faith and science need not be adversaries. A balanced approach. Sophia, my wife, said something similar once. His voice softened on his wife's name. She found wonder in both cathedral and fossil bed. It was the first time he had spoken his wife's name in Beatrice's presence, and she sensed the significance of the moment. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. His gaze turned distant. Too remarkable for the constraints of society, some would say. Before Beatrice could inquire further, James called them over to examine a particularly fearsome-looking creature, and the moment passed. That evening, however, after the children had been put to bed, Beatrice was surprised to receive a summons to the Baron's study. She found him standing by the window, a glass of brandy in his hand, his formal evening attire emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. You wish to see me, my lord? He turned, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. I thought we might speak privately. Beatrice perched on the edge of the chair, hands folded in her lap. I observed you today with the children, he began. Your patience with James's endless questions, your encouragement of Emma's more reserved curiosity. You have a gift for teaching. Thank you, my lord. They are a joy to instruct. He set down his glass and took the seat opposite her. Miss Redfield, I feel I owe you an explanation. Emma has likely shared rumors with you about my reputation in London society. Beatrice hesitated. She mentioned some gossip, yes. But children often misunderstand adult matters. Unfortunately, in this case, the gossip has a grain of truth. His expression grew somber. After Sophia died, I withdrew from society. Grief made me intolerable. I neglected my children, immersed myself in scientific research, and behaved in ways that gave rise to speculation. Grief can transform us in ways we don't anticipate, Beatrice said quietly, thinking of her father's decline. Indeed. He met her gaze directly. There were rumors that I had somehow contributed to Sophia's death. That my interest in producing an heir had weakened her constitution. That I had been a cold, demanding husband. Such accusations must have been painful. They were painful because they contained elements of truth. I was obsessed with my research, often absent. Sophia supported my work, but I failed to recognize the toll her last pregnancy was taking. His hands clenched. By the time I noticed, it was too late. The raw honesty of his confession moved Beatrice. My lord, childbirth has claimed many women, regardless of their husband's attention or lack thereof. Perhaps. But I cannot help but wonder if things might have been different had I been more present. He rose, moving restlessly to the fireplace. After her death, I threw myself into the scientific societies, seeking distraction. My behavior became erratic. I challenged accepted theories, quarreled with colleagues, ignored social obligations. Society loves nothing more than to see the mighty fall. And the children suffered for it, Beatrice observed gently. Yes. The single word held volumes of regret. I've been a poor father. The parade of governesses Emma mentioned, each was a failed attempt to provide them with the guidance I couldn't offer myself. Yet you've changed. I see how you engage with them now. He turned to face her. Because of you, Miss Redfield. Your approach to education, your gentle persistence, you've reminded me of what Sophia valued. What I once valued before grief narrowed my vision. Beatrice felt her heart quicken at his words, aware they had ventured beyond the conventional boundaries between employer and governess. I'm merely doing what any proper teacher would, she demurred. No. His voice was firm. You've done more than teach my children. You've taught me to see them again, to recognize the pieces of Sophia that live on in them. The intensity of his gaze made Beatrice rise from her chair. My lord, it's growing late. Alexander, he said suddenly. When we are alone, I would have you call me Alexander. That would be most improper, she protested weakly. Propriety has brought me little comfort these past years. He moved closer. Beatrice, may I call you Beatrice? I find myself drawn to your mind, your spirit, in a way I had not anticipated. My lord, Alexander, this is sudden. Beatrice felt simultaneously thrilled and alarmed. We barely know one another. On the contrary. Through my children, through our discussions of literature and science, I've come to know you quite well. His voice softened. But I've startled you. Forgive me. It was not my intention to cause discomfort. Beatrice gathered her composure. Not discomfort, precisely. Surprise. I am, after all, merely your children's governess. You are far more than that, though society might not recognize it. He stepped back, creating a more appropriate distance between them. I won't press you further tonight. But I would ask you to consider that titles and positions need not define the connection between two minds, or two hearts. With those words hanging in the air, he bid her good night, leaving Beatrice to return to her room with her thoughts in turmoil. The remaining days in London passed in a curious state of awareness. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Beatrice continued her duties as governess, accompanying the children to museums and gardens, supervising their correspondence with distant relatives, ensuring their manners remained impeccable when visitors called. Yet beneath this ordinary surface, something had fundamentally shifted. She found herself acutely conscious of Alexander's presence, noticing details she had previously overlooked, the way sunlight caught the silver in his hair, the rare but transformative nature of his smile, the gentleness of his hands when helping Emma turn a page or steadying James as he examined a delicate artifact. For his part, the Baron maintained a respectful distance in company but found ways to engage her in private conversation, discussing a book they had both read, seeking her opinion on the children's progress, inviting her to view a particular exhibit he thought might interest her. On their final evening in London, Alexander arranged for his sister, Lady Caroline Preston, to watch the children while he escorted Beatrice to a private viewing of astronomical instruments at the Royal Society. "Is this entirely proper?" Beatrice questioned as their carriage rolled through the darkening streets. "My sister knows you accompany me, and the society will be filled with scientists and their wives," he replied. "Besides, propriety seems a poor reason to deny you access to knowledge that clearly interests you." The evening proved illuminating in more ways than one. Beatrice found herself introduced to leading minds of the age, her opinion solicited and respected in a manner she had never experienced. Alexander remained close, his hand occasionally resting lightly at the small of her back as he guided her through the crowded rooms. "You've impressed Sir Richard," he murmured as they moved away from a conversation with a prominent astronomer. "He rarely engages with women on scientific matters. Perhaps he should more often." His wife clearly understood his work better than some of his male colleagues, Beatrice observed. Alexander's laugh drew curious glances from nearby guests. "You continue to surprise me, Beatrice." As they prepared to depart, a coldly elegant woman intercepted them near the entrance. "Alexander Brantley. How unexpected to see you in society again," she said, her assessing gaze moving to Beatrice. "And with company." "Lady Harrington," Alexander acknowledged stiffly. "May I present Miss Beatrice Redfield, governess to my children?" The woman's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. "A governess? At the Royal Society? How progressive of you." "Miss Redfield has a keen scientific mind. The exhibition is as educationally valuable to her as to any gentleman here." Lady Harrington's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed? Well, London has always enjoyed your unconventional choices, Alexander. First your wife's peculiar interests, and now this. The gossips will be delighted." Beatrice felt Alexander tense beside her. "Lady Harrington," he replied with dangerous calm, "you would do well to remember that while society may tolerate malicious gossip, I do not. Particularly regarding my late wife or those under my protection." The woman's smile faltered. "Merely an observation, Baron. No offense intended." She nodded curtly to Beatrice. "Miss Redfield." As Lady Harrington swept away, Beatrice released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I believe I've just experienced London society at its most venomous. Victoria Harrington was once engaged to my cousin. When he chose military service in India over marriage to her, she transferred her ambitions to me. Sophia's appearance, and my immediate attraction to her, was never forgiven. Hence her barbed comments about your wife. Sophia was the daughter of a professor, educated, outspoken, and utterly uninterested in social climbing. Lady Harrington considered her beneath notice until I married her, at which point she became a target." His expression darkened. "Even after Sophia's death, the whispers continued." "And now she'll add me to her collection of Brantley scandals," Beatrice said with forced lightness. Alexander took her hand, propriety forgotten. "Let her. I've lived too long constrained by fear of gossip." His words echoed in Beatrice's mind during the journey back to Belvington Hall. She found herself at a crossroads, drawn to Alexander in a way that both thrilled and frightened her, yet acutely aware of the vast gulf in their social positions. The matter came to a head unexpectedly, 3 weeks after their return from London. Beatrice had taken the children for a nature walk, collecting specimens for a project on local flora. A summer storm arose suddenly, sending them hurrying back toward the hall as thunder rumbled ominously overhead. They were crossing the meadow when lightning split the sky, startling the children. James bolted ahead while Emma clung to Beatrice's hand. The first heavy drops began to fall as they reached the edge of the formal gardens. Alexander appeared on the terrace, concern evident in his expression. "Inside, quickly," he called as the rain intensified. They had nearly reached the shelter of the house when Beatrice's foot caught on the hem of her sudden skirt. She stumbled, twisting her ankle painfully as she fell to the gravel path. Alexander was at her side instantly, lifting her into his arms before she could protest. "James, run ahead and tell Mrs. Winters to prepare hot baths for you both," he instructed. "Emma, go with your brother." The children hurried inside while Alexander carried Beatrice through the French doors into the drawing room, setting her gently on a chaise longue. "I can walk," she protested weakly, acutely aware of her sodden appearance and his proximity. "Not on that ankle." His voice was firm as he knelt beside her, his hands moving to examine her injury with surprising gentleness. "Does this hurt?" His fingers probed carefully, causing Beatrice to wince. "A little. I don't believe it's broken, but you should stay off it for a day or two." He looked up, his expression softening as he took in her bedraggled state. "You're drenched to the skin." Self-consciousness flooded her. "I must look a fright." "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his hand still resting on her ankle. "Beatrice, The drawing room door opened, admitting Mrs. Winters, whose eyes widened at the tableau before her. "My lord." "Miss Redfield has been injured." Alexander rose smoothly. A twisted ankle from the rain-slicked path. "Have hot water sent to Miss Redfield's room, and perhaps a tray of tea. She'll need to rest." "Of course, my lord." The housekeeper's expression remained neutral, but Beatrice detected the calculation behind her eyes. After Mrs. Winters departed, Alexander helped Beatrice to stand, supporting her weight as she tested her ankle. "Lean on me," he murmured, his arm encircling her waist. The journey to her room was slow, each step bringing her into greater awareness of his solid presence beside her. By the time they reached her door, Beatrice's heart was racing, and not from exertion. "Alexander," she began hesitantly, what the housekeeper saw. "Will undoubtedly join the growing collection of Brantley scandals," he finished with unexpected humor. "I find I care less each day what others think. But your position, your children's position in society, will remain secure regardless." His expression grew serious. "Beatrice, these past weeks have awakened something in me I thought died with Sophia. I cannot, will not, ignore it out of fear of gossip." Before she could respond, a maid appeared with the hot water, forcing Alexander to step back. "Rest your ankle," he said formally. "We shall speak again tomorrow." That night, as rain lashed against her windows, Beatrice lay awake, replaying his words and the unmistakable tenderness in his eyes. Was it possible that this man, this aristocrat, this brilliant, complex widower, truly harbored feelings for a penniless vicar's daughter? Morning brought clarity in unexpected form. As Beatrice sat in her room, her injured ankle propped on a footstool, Emma appeared with a breakfast tray. "Father sent this," the girl explained, setting it down carefully. "He said you're to rest today, and James and I are to study independently." "That's very thoughtful." Beatrice gestured for Emma to sit. "How are you this morning? Not caught cold from yesterday's rain, I hope?" "No, I'm well." Emma hesitated, then blurted, "Are you going to marry father?" Beatrice nearly upset her tea. "What?" "Emma, whatever gave you that idea?" "The way he looks at you." "And Mrs. Winters told Cook she saw him carrying you yesterday, looking at you like you were precious." Heat flooded Beatrice's cheeks. "Your father was merely being kind to an injured employee." Emma's expression turned knowing beyond her years. That's not how James and I see it. We've discussed it, actually. Have you indeed? Beatrice said faintly. Yes. James worried at first that you might make us study more if you became our stepmother, but I reminded him that you already let him experiment with his mechanical things more than any other governess. Emma, this is most improper. Your father has not, that is, there has been no, Beatrice faltered. The girl reached for her hand. We wouldn't mind, you know. If father married you. You make him smile again. After Emma departed, Beatrice sat in turmoil. The children's apparent approval only complicated matters. A governess marrying her employer, it was the stuff of servants' gossip and drawing-room scandal. Yet Alexander had made his feelings increasingly clear, and her own heart. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Expecting the maid to collect her tray, she called, "Enter." Instead, Alexander himself appeared, a book in his hand and uncertainty in his expression. Forgive the intrusion. I brought something to occupy you during your convalescence. He placed the volume on the small table beside her. Darwin's A Voyage of the Beagle. I thought it might interest you. Thank you, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Emma visited earlier. Did she? His expression grew wary. And what did my forthright daughter have to say? Beatrice took a deep breath. She asked if I was going to marry you. Alexander's startled laugh held more relief than humor. Direct as always. She comes by it honestly, her mother was equally blunt. He sobered, meeting Beatrice's gaze. And how did you answer? I told her it was improper to speculate on such matters. A diplomatic response. He moved closer, taking the chair Emma had vacated. But now I ask, not as your employer but as a man who has found himself increasingly drawn to your mind, your spirit, your very presence, could you consider such a possibility? Beatrice's heart thundered in her chest. Alexander, there are 1,000 reasons why it would be deemed inappropriate. The difference in our stations means nothing to me. The gossip has followed me regardless of my actions. I would rather face it for something that brings joy than continue to bow to its dictates. Your children apparently approve, if Emma's question is any indication. He leaned forward, taking her hands in his. Beatrice, when Sophia died, I thought my capacity for love died with her. I buried myself in science, in abstract theories, because the reality of my loss was too painful to bear. I neglected my children, not out of lack of love but because they reminded me too painfully of what was gone. He continued, his voice low and intense. Then you arrived at Belvington, this quiet, determined woman who saw my children clearly and challenged me to see them too. Who spoke of dinosaurs and faith in the same breath. Who faced down London society with grace and intelligence. Alexander, let me finish, please. His grip on her hands tightened. I do not propose on impulse or infatuation. These months have shown me the kind of woman you are, principled, intelligent, compassionate. The kind of woman I never expected to find again. The kind of woman I could love, if you would permit it. Beatrice felt tears well in her eyes. And if I were to permit it? What then? Would society ever truly accept such a match? Some would, some wouldn't. Does it matter so very much? For your children, it might. Alexander's expression softened. Emma and James have already lost one mother to death. They've endured a parade of temporary governesses and a father lost in grief. What they need now is stability, love, and guidance, all of which you provide already. He rose from his chair to kneel beside her, still holding her hands. I am not a perfect man, Beatrice. Grief made me bitter, science made me skeptical, and privilege made me blind to much. But you've helped me see beyond my narrow world. I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. Beatrice looked into his eyes, those storm-grey eyes now clear with hope, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. Society will talk, she whispered, a final token protest. Let them, he replied, and kissed her. Their wedding took place that autumn in the village church where Beatrice's father had once preached. Emma served as bridesmaid, solemn in her responsibilities, while James proudly bore the rings, having been assured that his scientific pursuits would continue unabated under his new mother's guidance. Society did indeed talk. The London papers carried brief mentions of the eccentric Baron Brantley's unsuitable match, and Lady Harrington was reportedly apoplectic. Yet for each whisper of scandal, there came unexpected sources of support. Alexander's scientific colleagues, impressed by Beatrice's intellect, his sister Caroline, who declared herself delighted that her brother had found happiness again, even the Dowager Countess of Lockwood, who announced at her famous autumn ball that a man who chooses a woman of substance over a woman of status shows remarkably good sense for a man. As for Alexander and Beatrice, they greeted the gossip with united indifference. Their world centered on Belvington Hall, now transformed from a house of shadows to a home filled with learning and laughter. The library, once Alexander's solitary retreat, became the heart of the household, where science and literature, faith and reason coexisted in harmony. On the first anniversary of their meeting, Alexander presented Beatrice with a gift, a delicately crafted silver locket containing miniature portraits of Emma and James on one side and, on the other, a pressed wildflower from the meadow where she had fallen. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that sometimes the most fortunate accidents lead us where we're meant to be." Beatrice touched the locket and smiled. "Not accident," she corrected gently. "Providence." Alexander's laugh echoed in the library, the laugh of a man who had found his way back from grief to joy, guided by a country vicar's daughter who had become first his children's governess, then his heart's companion. "Providence indeed," he agreed, and kissed her in the golden afternoon light, as Emma and James pretended not to watch from behind the astronomy books.